To introduce this illustrious panel, please join me in welcoming the CEO of our nation's second largest green builder, a member of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group Board of Directors, and the CEO of WebCore Builders, Andy Ball.
Thank you, Carl. Welcome back to our third session today. I hope you enjoyed the first two as much as I did. I think that we finally found somebody that's as much a character as Governor Brown can be. I won't even try and pronounce it. It's a Hickenlooper. Governor Hickenlooper. Great. It was great. We're going to talk about Silicon Valley and the Bay Area's innovation economy today. I find it interesting as you look at the panel that when we're talking about innovation in the Silicon Valley, we have the mayor of San Francisco. And I think as they start to talk, it's going to come into perspective that when you have a giant like IBM anchored here in the south end of the valley, that you're seeing in between companies like Google and Apple and Facebook with incredible growth. Up in San Francisco, companies that Mayor Ed Lee has really welcomed to the fold in Twitter and Zynga, companies that are into cloud computing like Salesforce, hiring lots and lots of people that not only want to live and work in the valley, but now recognize San Francisco as being part of the valley with its spectrum. We are indeed fortunate from San Jose to San Francisco to be part of the innovation economy. And we are finally seeing that once again, California's innovation is leading us out of the last 3 years of recession. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty tired of the recession. I think I made a statement several years ago that it was about time for a nice adjustment to the economy. Things were too expensive, too overheated. And about 2 years after that, I very much regretted making that comment. It was great to hear Jim Sporer say that when you look at education and you look at the programs in traveling around the world, that there's one constant, and that's the people in technology say this is the place they want to be. Entrepreneurs say this is the place they want to be. When companies like Facebook are started at an institution like Harvard but end up here, you start to recognize why this area is so special and why it's so vibrant and why truly innovation is leading our economy. So let me try to give a brief introduction about our panel today. And I have to confess that I only just met one of our panelists, Lisa Dyson, who is the CEO of Incubators. She got a PhD in physics from MIT, but she felt the urge to come out to California, and she did her research at Stanford and Lawrence Berkeley Labs. So that's an indication that we're getting smart people like her to come out here to California and start up a company like Incubators, which started in 2008, has 15 employees. And it's very interesting. We talk about cloud computing, social networking, all these technology companies, but she takes recycled waste that's rich in carbon, and she recycles that into oil for plastics and a variety of other things. And I wish I'd had more time to talk to you, to get to know you, because I'm sure that there's a very interesting story and you're going to really enjoy hearing from her. You've already heard from Michael Karasik, who it's wonderful that IBM is hosting us today. And clearly IBM is a leader in this area, and with Michael's travels around the world, he's going to share some more of his experience, and that'll be also a very interesting perspective. But I really want to welcome San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee, and it's difficult for me to call him Mayor Lee because I've known him as Ed for many years, and I went up and congratulated him, and I said, Mayor Lee said, "Now call me Ed." So I'm going to call him Ed today, and you're going to get to know him real well because he's a really wonderful guy. The 43rd mayor of San Francisco. He was born in Seattle, went to Bowdoin College in Maine, this tiny little college out there, but he decided to come back and get his law degree from UC Berkeley, and then was appointed by Art Agnos into San Francisco government in 1989. In '91, became the executive director of the Human Rights Commission. Under Willie Brown, he became the director of purchasing. In 2000, director of public works. 2005, city administrator. And then the fateful day in January 2011 when the Board of Supervisors couldn't decide on anybody but decided that Ed Lee was not going to be a threat to their future political aspirations. And he got more than 6 votes, which is 6 more than anybody else got, I think. And he became the interim mayor. But he did an amazing job. He's outspoken, both feet on the ground, a person you can trust, a person who's very honest, and really, based upon his experience there, really knows how to get the job done. I believe he's the best mayor ever that San Francisco has had. We're so lucky to have him up there. He's balanced the budget, he's reformed pensions, he's created jobs. And Mayor Ed Lee, it has been a pleasure working with you up there, and I look forward to working with you further. A San Francisco transplant coming down here to work on yet another newspaper, the San Jose Business Journal, and doing a very good job of it is James McGregor. And we welcome you here as the moderator. I know you've got a lot of great questions, so I'll let you have at it. Thank you.
Andy, thank you. Well, Mayor Lee, after that stellar introduction,
wow,
this first question is for you. It is apparent that you are trying to make San Francisco more friendly for business and employees. Can you talk a little bit about the payroll tax issue there and how it's helping San Francisco and the region?
Thank you. Thank you, James, for that question. And just let me say that I'm very happy to be here at Silicon Valley Leadership Forum. I know the relationship with San Francisco and the Valley and San Jose is extremely important. So I wanted to be down here and join these illustrious panel guests as well. You know, the payroll tax in San Francisco had been one that I was here about a year ago, and we were explaining the company called Twitter, as everybody knows, was not only threatening, they were planning to leave the city of San Francisco. They had already identified a building in South San Francisco, and of course, they were saying that, look, we're about to grow from 450 employees to about 2,000, and we're going to get taxed for that. And we think that that's just not going to be our business model. And so we thought through it. David Chu and Jane Kim and I, there are 2 supervisors on the board, we started discussing with them and met with them. And the key thing was job growth for our city coming out of the economic challenges. And so we began a good conversation. We created the Central Market Payroll Tax Exemption. Goes from 10th to 6th Street. So we got something out of it, which was for them to potentially locate there, and they did. They signed a long-term lease, and we responded with a 6-year exemption. But we also promised that we would have a couple of levels of dialogue. We would continue discussing with them and a number of other technology companies what it is that they needed to actually stay in the city for a long term. And they indicated very strongly, and there were about 30 of them that came in to meet with us, that from Zynga, Salesforce, Twitter, and a bunch of others, that they really had to take a look at the long term. What could we do to not punish job creation? And so we've had a very robust discussion with all of the different elements in our business community, and we are at the cusp now of making some long-term decisions about replacing our whole payroll tax with some ideas of combining or some hybrids with gross receipts and so forth. But that was just the beginning.
I want to follow up on that. What surprises did you hear when you met with all of those businesses?
Well, they wanted to be engaged with government. I mean, that was the number one thing that they said, that the city, if you wanted job creation, if you wanted their innovation, you had to create an ongoing dialogue. And we listened very carefully and we acted on it. In fact, we created a whole technology group with them. Ron Conway and a number of others had stepped up and said, why don't we have a consistent voice? Okay. Yes, we have the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and wonderful group that we've worked with for many, many years, but why not also have an additional voice? And so we formed SF City, a Citizens Initiative for Technology and Innovation, which was kind of aimed at these new developing companies to give us a constant dialogue about their ongoing needs.
Okay.
And the neat thing that we've done is they have also embraced some of the needs of our city. It's a two-way conversation. So it's listening to what they need to do, and that led to us revising our whole stock options. We were one of the very few cities, perhaps in the whole country, that was taxing stock options.
Okay.
And again, not understanding how the IPO was working for these startup companies and realizing that we were going to punish them for their growth and their turnaround. So we gave another 6-year exemption on that, caused another dialogue, and we said, by the way, if we grow, if we sustain and assist you in growing, can you help us with job training? And that's what started a conversation on SF City.
Okay.
And they've got an ongoing basis to help us with job training and creating the curriculum for hiring kids from not only our public schools, but aimed at returning veterans,
okay.
aimed at mid-career folks that want to change and get into technology-based industries. And then I think the snowball effect has really helped. In fact, Twitter, not even moving in, there's 4 other companies that moved into mid-market because of the payroll tax exemption. And Zendesk, Zoosk, CallSocket is in there now, and One Kings Lane. Mark Pincus's wife, Ali, started her own company on online merchandising and furniture. Sure. They're all moving in, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of square feet of space that had been vacant for many, many years. So revitalizing our city at the same time, doing job creation, creating the conditions for hiring and for training our local San Franciscans to get into the new workforce. And then, as Andy is saying, it's caused other industries, in particular the construction industry, to get revitalized immediately. You've heard that Salesforce had 14 acres in Mission Bay, and they were about to build and design, and they got excited about just being in downtown, so they went ahead and did 400,000 square feet, and now they're looking at even larger space to continue their exhibiting growth downtown.
I want to direct this next question to you, Lisa. Every company in this valley, no matter how it's defined in terms of geography, has been a startup at some point. Where do the ideas for great products and services, come from?
Great, yes. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here and to address you today. And that's a great question. And I want to start by thanking the city of San Francisco for being a part of actually an incubator that we are a part of. It's called the QB3 Innovation Center. So a lot of innovation.
Where is that in San Francisco?
It's located in San Francisco. It's near UCSF's Mission Bay campus. It's a part of the Fibrogen building where there's lots of biotechnology laboratory space available.
Okay.
And there's about 29 or so startup companies in that space developing innovative technologies. So I'm in biotechnology primarily. Our technology creates oil using a biological process that takes waste carbon as an input. Ideas such as ours often come from universities, and it's really a benefit for us to be right by UC San Francisco, to be a part of the QB3 Innovation Center, and that stands for Quantitative Biosciences in 3 campuses. So not only is UCSF a part of that, but UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz. Okay. So we're part of this network. In addition, we have a technology development partner that's Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories. Okay. So for us, a lot of the breakthroughs in our technology have really come from our partners at research laboratories and our staff, and most of them are actually PhDs. And I will add to that not only is that where it came from, but it's a type of environment that sort of fosters creation. There's another benefit to being in this type of an environment is there's a lot of service providers, there's a lot of other companies that are also starting businesses, whether you need legal assistance, whether you need, obviously we have the lab space, we have recruiting. Recruiting is really important for startups, and we get that ecosystem. Staffing, okay. Exactly. So we get that ecosystem with being a part of this innovation center.
So it's about access to education and access to the right environment.
Yes, okay. I would say so.
So Michael, I want to turn to you for a minute because IBM is a big company, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in this valley that still in many ways see it as an East Coast-based company, but the reality is that you've been here for a long, long time. Can you talk about the entrepreneurial culture here and what's being done with all of the great ideas that are coming out of this facility?
Sure. Actually, yeah, we started our research presence here in 1952. This building's about 25 years old, in case anybody was wondering. We were what we used to call down the hill, the San Jose Research Center, which is where the disk drive was invented. So one of the things that IBM does, a couple of things. So one is a really solid eye on the ball, on the future, on where things are going. One of the reasons that we focused here on data, relational database, disk drive, was looking at the time, the inability to access data quickly on a computer was actually an inhibitor to getting business done. So one of the ways that you get innovation out there is you understand how it's going to be used, really before you start on it. And the major reason for working on the disk drive here, aside from the obvious technology base that this place has and continues to have, was just an understanding that high-speed access to data is going to create an opportunity for businesses to do what they do quickly. We call them transactions today. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is 1955. So we've reinvented ourselves. Bit of trivia: IBM's very first product was cheese slicers. We don't make them anymore. So it's this place also reinvents itself in a continual basis, and in that sense, we feel very at home here. So the ability to reinvent, the ability to have a real sense of where things are going is also something we see in the Bay Area. A strategic view here. When I came here, I've only been here since August, so I'm a newbie. And one of the things that I learned that we don't talk about as much about the Bay Area is this amazing mentoring culture here. So we see folks like Lisa who are, young dynamic maniacs, mm-hmm. I think, quiet as she is here. But there's this very, very active, quiet, kind of gray-haired mentoring culture to help people do what they do, and I don't see that anywhere else. People give of their time, they give of themselves sure. here, and that's just a spectacular way to foster innovation.
I want to talk about the state of innovation here in the Bay Area for a moment. And this question is for all of you, but I'll start with you, Mary Lee. How would you describe the state of innovation in the Bay Area right now? And are you concerned, Instagram perhaps comes to mind, about another bubble? Or is the innovation economy a lot more mature this time around?
Yeah, we've been getting that question a lot and been trying to analyze it with not only financial people, but people in the industry. And I do think that there's a lot more maturity with the companies. I get a chance every Tuesday to go out and talk to one new company a week. That's what I get out of my little City Hall prison. But to really meet the innovators. But the nice part of it is they introduce me to their employees. I get to have a direct dialogue with the employees and ask them what they need to stay and innovative. And they say they really like being in our city because of the vibrant nightlife, the culture. They want education. They want a better mm-hmm. transit system. They always have ideas for improving our municipal transit system.
Sure.
But when we talk about the whole Bay Area, including Silicon Valley, they still talk the same thing. It's the transportation systems, obviously Central Subway for us, mm-hmm. High-speed rail. Clearly, the BART to San Jose has been incredibly important to everybody, mm-hmm. so that people can travel and feel that they have that ease. I think there's a lot more maturity. There's successful companies that have already turned the corner on making a profit. The startups have long-term views. They're not, I think, looking for instant gratification, as I believe the attitude was back in the late 90s and
sure.
mid 2000s. I think people are talking a lot about issues on stability and asking government, like ours, to be with them on the long term and to create relationships. And certainly for capital investors, it really is that relationship building, and they want that face-to-face time sure. with with investors around our city. And so we're creating conditions for that to happen. And I think they're making, I even look at the leases, they're not short-term leases, they're long-term leases. And Twitter signed in for a good 10 years, and others have signed for long-term leases as well. So they're in it for the long haul, and I think they're measuring their success and building on them. You know, Square and Salesforce, they've been there for quite some time already, not only innovating and starting up, we want them to stay and grow.
Absolutely.
And we've been creating those conditions for that conversation to happen.
And Michael and Lisa, anything to add to that? About the state of innovation, and is this the right time in the Valley, and is it real, or is it still a bubble? Or is it a bubble in comparison to 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I would like to speak towards a different sector, towards the clean tech sector.
Okay.
So there was a little bit of a bubble that emerged in 2005, 2006, 2007 timeframe. And I think that what has happened since then is you've seen the landscape change. There have been a lot of companies and VCs, very importantly the funders, that are really focused on very few investments, very few companies, and in it for the long run, in it for the time that it takes and the investment that it takes to build a clean tech company. So the difference with clean tech is typically there may be large facilities required, a huge investment to build your first plant, for instance. So we're definitely seeing a change in that landscape. But one thing that I want to add too are specifically for clean tech, there's maturing organizations like the Clean Tech Open that really foster innovation, that really identify and help entrepreneurs with that ecosystem, you know, present their idea, put together a business plan, attract the mentors, the advisors to help them build their technologies, and the incubators. I think these are contributing to sort of a maturing clean tech and biotech sector.
Okay. And Michael?
Yeah, just a short comment. So we focus in this building, it's a research facility, on fundamental technology mostly. Some of it is relatively near term, some of it is very long term. I'm glad to hear what Lisa just said. I worry personally that we don't see as many long-term investments here as we used to.
How do you define a long-term investment?
Good question. I think the question is how speculative is an investment?
Okay.
Okay, so what we talk about here, I'll use us as an example. We have a team in this building working on lithium-air batteries. Their goal is to build a battery with 500 miles of range in it for obvious reasons. We kind of hope they'll have a prototype in a few years. We think if the stars are lined up, maybe there'll be something in the marketplace in 10 plus or minus years. That's a long-term investment.
It's a long-term investment. The next question again to all of you, and Michael, we'll start with you this time. We know that government at the local, regional, and state levels can help or hinder mature companies and startups alike. What would you like to see from the governments here in the Valley and in the Bay Area, Sacramento, or in DC, that you think will strengthen the innovation economy?
Yeah, so I could go on about immigration and corporate tax policy reform, but I'm a researcher, so I won't.
And we have 7 minutes.
And we have 7 minutes. So Mayor Lee said it perfectly when he said that the fundamental thing that companies are looking for is to be engaged in the process. So we use a term in computing called agile. We look for more agility and ability to be nimble working with us. Let us iterate with you to define a process, rather than what we often see is what we call a waterfall. Here it is, take it or leave it.
Okay.
So flexibility and agility is, I think, what we're looking for.
Mayor Lee?
I've always thought of our city in San Francisco as being a gateway to the rest of the world. And so I've often talked about with companies as small as the ones that just started within last year, saying, I want to be there for you when you not only turn the corner. We want to be the city that creates international markets for your products. And so, I don't know if you know this, we have 70 consul general offices in San Francisco, the highest number outside of Washington, D.C. We want to take advantage of this gateway that we have to the rest of the world and make sure that our companies know we're not just in it for San Francisco, for the region. We've got to have international markets. They love hearing that because they want to, some of the companies already know that they've got game players in China and Japan, but also cloud computing, all the technology breakthroughs have international capacity. And I think that's why we need a regional approach. That's why I'm down here partly too, is to make sure that we protect our Hetch Hetchy water system, because I think that creates the quality of life that we want, and it helps start so many companies here in Silicon Valley to stay here and grow here. That's why we need regional transit systems. That's why we need a regional approach to it. And whatever companies don't here, they can end up going to Europe, or they go to Japan or China. We want them to maybe have their headquarters right here in the Bay Area.
Is there one regional issue that elected officials across the region could focus on? So if we're back here 12 months from now, I'm able to ask you the question, so here's what you said 12 months ago, Marilee, and here's where we are now. Is there one thing?
I still think it's going to be transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah, and I think we have to make that infrastructure investment. We've got to get our federal government and our state government a little bit more aligned. And I know Jerry is a big fan of our high-speed rail, but we've got to turn the corner on that, because for us in San Francisco, for example, a third of our flights out of SFO is the LA to San Francisco commute. And we can't have the capacity for international flights. And the whole secret behind international success is have those international flights come in. Okay. Unless we move that LA commute over the high-speed rail, which I think is an excellent thing, we won't create the capacity that we need because we can't expand the airport.
All right. The last word on this question is to you, Lisa.
Thank you. So I'll say a couple of things slightly differently. One of the core things that startups do is they develop a lot of IP. When dealing with getting your patents filed, getting them approved, it's a very long, drawn-out process. So that's something that if there could be emphasis on accelerated patenting process, that would be beneficial. And in particular, even having a patent office here in the Silicon Valley, which is where a lot of patents, I think the majority of the patents are actually generated. And I know there are some, Dianne Feinstein and others that have pushed for that in the past. And the other thing that I'll add about funding and investing in the different initiatives that governments have, like AB 32 in California, grants that are given to foster and to further push innovation forward. It's something that is done very well in university setting, and I think that further investment in companies to take the research to the commercialization phase is something that we've benefited from. Absolutely. And would love for that to continue.
Okay. So the last question for the panel is to you, Lisa. So say this is a room full of potential funders. What we'd like to hear is your elevator pitch.
Absolutely, great. So at Keyverdi, we are addressing two issues. On the one hand, there's an ever-increasing amount of waste that is generated. As we drift towards 9 billion people in 2040, we're generating waste in landfills, manufacturing waste, agricultural residue, et cetera. How do we address that? Is there a way to use that? On the other hand, oil is a core feedstock for almost everything that we use, whether it's plastics, detergents, obviously fuel. How can we address a sustainable source of oil? And at Keyverdi, we address those by bridging the gap. We've developed an innovative technology that's a two-step process that takes waste carbon resources, a variety of different waste carbon resources, and converts them through a biological process into oil that can be used in everyday products. And we do it at a lower cost and sustainably that has a benefit for not only industry but for the planet.
I'll go get my checkbook.
Great.
Last words to you, Lisa. A round of applause for our panel. So according to Carl, we have 5 more minutes. Yes. So you get to clap again in 5 more minutes. So since we have an additional 5 minutes. You've all talked a little bit about the culture here. How important is it that the environment here succeeds in continuing to draw people and draw talent and draw investment? I mean, the example that we heard in your introduction was you went to school at MIT, you came here to start your business. You know, there's another guy, the CEO of Facebook, who has said if he had it all to do over again, he would have stayed in Boston. How important is that culture and environment?
I think it's critical. It's critical to have minds that have been educated, interdisciplinary people coming to the table, different perspectives, that energy and enthusiasm around thinking differently, around paradigm shifts, around developing breakthrough technologies, and to be able to attract those people to this area is crucial. And I think that that's something that that's been a benefit of being here, is that a lot of people are indeed attracted to Silicon Valley. But that's crucial for any company that's starting and taking their technology to the next level.
Can you talk about the incubator?
Yes.
The QB3 in
Yes,
San Francisco a little bit.
Mission Bay, everybody knows here that's been up there. UC San Francisco has kind of anchored it with their research, but now we have some of the largest pharmaceutical companies have their research labs in Mission Bay as well. And Bayer and others, and they're even innovating about their laboratories because it's so expensive to have to build your own laboratory. So they're causing co-laboratories to try to bring some of these pharmaceutical answers to the market faster. They have an incredible spirit of innovation in those laboratories, and they're inviting other companies, not just from the Bay Area or even our country, they're inviting international. We had our first Canadian incubator that was established just a couple months ago, and they're excited to be kind of cross-referencing their research and their ideas, and I think it really is.
And why are they coming here?
They're coming here because there is really ongoing levels of conversation and sharing of experiences that are part of kind of thinking outside of the box and thinking in different ways, turning things a little upside down, hacking your way through some of these ideas and not being afraid of what you may find or not find, and trying to find applicability for them. And I think that's the spirit of the Valley, it's the spirit of San Francisco. We've always been a little edgy when it comes to openness, but we're taking advantage of that. And we want, I think, to embrace different cultures to kind of impact that as well. Because what people see here might be a little different than how they see it in India, in some of the other countries that are emerging their technology as well, and trying to apply it in ways in which it would have a great benefit, or just thinking very differently about it. I think the spirit of innovation is an attractive thing for talent. Obviously, education is behind it as well. There's a lot of confidence about being able to risk and be a little more risk-taking, and that's part of kind of my mayorship. I didn't apply to be the mayor of San Francisco. I took that risk with a very good knowledge that, sure, I may not be a school politician, but I wanted to build completely different relationships with people, and I think we've done that and invited a lot more different kinds of talent to come in and use that free spirit in innovating.
Michael, the last word on this to you.
Yeah, so knowledge gets created where the people who exist think about the problems. And what must be sustained here is that focus on getting deep into the problems, because from understanding the problems comes ideas. And this is an idea generating place, and it's like no other. I spent 3 years living in Beijing, and I watched what they're trying to do over there. Fundamentally different. Here is inherently an open, bottom-up idea meritocracy, and it's a good way for this place to be.
I want to follow up on that because there are so many other places in the world that want to replicate what we have here. Is that possible?
Well, I guess what's the appropriate answer? Anything's possible. I think there's a bunch of things that come together here. Education is a big piece of it. You know, much as we've talked about the challenges we have in educating our youth, it's still the case that education here is as much about the journey as about the end result. My personal belief is that as long as we keep that focus on the inquiry as opposed to the yes/no result, we'll do fine. When you look at other parts in the world, my view is you can gauge how innovative a populace you're going to generate by the way they educate their people.
Okay.
You know, I would say Michael's got a really great point there, because I think it invites collaborative approaches to problem solving as well, and we have that spirit. We're having a great conversation in San Francisco right now about what we have defined as shared economy, kind of this collaborative consumption that's going on, where it began for me, it was like car sharing. I was a big fan of car sharing and the whole electric vehicle, and see if we can get less emissions from just the way habits. Well, now we're looking at companies like Airbnb and these other smaller innovative companies are taking a look at shared space and how to complement our environmental goals with new economies that are emerging out. And I think that's challenging the way our tax structure has been and the way we look at certain industries, but inviting a collaborative spirit of new ideas that would create literally new jobs and new economies over that. So it's exciting when you allow collaborative approaches to problem solving.
I promised the last word on the panel. I promise.
Great.
It's to you, Lisa.
The one thing that I will add to that is that, speaking to Michael's point earlier, one thing that you have here are a lot of people who've done it. They've started companies, they've succeeded, they've failed, they succeeded, they've invested, they've done all of the things that we as startups are trying to do and are navigating through. So having both those that are being educated, coming up with the bright ideas and the desire to start something new, and those who have done it, it creates a great ecosystem.
Now a round of applause for our panel.
And panelists, what an outstanding discussion on regional innovation. James McGregor, as always, it's a delight to partner with you. Lisa Dyson said, one thing we have here is a lot of people who have done it. Michael Karasik said, IBM's first product was a cheese slicer. We don't make those anymore. We keep innovating. And Mayor Lee, startups have long-term views. They are not looking for instant gratification. The key is long-term innovation with networking. It makes this region unique, doesn't it? I hope you enjoyed this panel as much as I did. I want to shine the spotlight just another moment on Lisa Dyson. You heard a little bit about her background. I hope you will Bing or Google her, whatever your preference is, and learn more about her company. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group did a soft launch in January of something we call Startup Silicon Valley. It is for innovation economy CEOs in this region to join the leadership group basically for free, because we want to capture in them the DNA that David Packard, our founder, had, which was a balance of running brilliant, dynamic companies while at the same time being deeply engaged in your communities and in the quality of life of your employees. That's the scale that we want to raise up in these incredibly innovative young entrepreneurs. We have about 20 of them here in the audience today. I want to just mention 3 of them and embarrass them. They don't know I'm going to do this, to stand. All of these have this in common. They have less than 40 employees currently. Their business has been around for less than 4 years. And like me, they're younger than 40 years old. Why are you laughing? Let me introduce the CEO of Snoozy, Bilal Humadi. Stand. The CEO of Good Joe, Nathan Pham. And the CEO of Sylvantex, Virginia Klausmeyer. A lot of these startups doing incredible innovation. Some will succeed, others will not. These people, however, will succeed no matter what they do. And that's why we're so excited about this new initiative. We want you to mentor and get to know and meet them. With that, we're going to go ahead and thank this panel a final time with, again, we don't W-H-I-N-E in Silicon Valley, but we do enjoy fine wine, W-I-N-E. So with the help of a colleague, Dennis Chima, our Senior Vice President for Public Policy, we have a wonderful Pinot Noir for each of our 3 panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.